Good evening. Welcome to the channel Stories to Sleep. Enjoy the story and have a great night of sleep.
I always thought that as we grow older, the sea changes its voice. When I was young, it used to shout, roar. It was a wild and impatient call. Now, with my bones creaking like the wood of a forgotten boat, it seems to whisper, like an old friend sitting beside us to remember the past. That afternoon, as the sun sank behind the salted hills of the small fishing village where I've lived for as long as I can remember, I was sitting on the porch, sharpening my old filleting knife. The blade no longer shone as it once did, but it still served me well. That's when I heard hurried footsteps in my yard, light footsteps of a child. It was Julia. My 10-year-old granddaughter appeared running, her freckles glowing in the late daylight, and her brown hair flying in a messy tangle. She threw herself into the chair beside me and looked at me with that expression only children can make, half challenging, half enchanted. "Grandpa, tell me a story. The one Mom said isn't true," she asked. I started laughing because my daughter always says my tales are exaggerated, but they aren't, not the ones that truly matter. The sea breeze passed between the roof tiles, carrying the scent of salt and something ancient, something only a sailor notices. The sky was orange, almost red, the color of promises and mystery. I looked at Julia, and Julia looked at me. "Do you want to hear the story of the tide that speaks?" I asked, setting the knife on the cloth. She straightened in her chair, her eyes shining. She said yes, that she wanted to hear that one. So I began. I told Julia that this story happened when I was about her father's age. I was still strong as an ox and stubborn as an anchor. Back then, the village was much smaller. Half a dozen houses, the crooked little church, Mr. Durval's shop, and the improvised pier made of old planks and ropes that smelled of seaweed. In those days, I used to fish alone. Pure stubbornness. My colleagues always said the sea is a place for company, but not me. I thought that alone I could better hear the signs that came from the ocean. And on an August dawn, when the sky was so dark it seemed to swallow the moon, I felt something calling me. Julia interrupted me at that point, shifting in her chair. She said I spoke as if the sea were a person. I answered that, for those who spend their lives on it, that's exactly what it is. The sea has moods, has a voice, has a soul, and that day it was in a hurry. I continued the story. I left before sunrise with my small boat, the Orval Hado. The engine coughed like an old drunk, but it was reliable, and the farther I got from the coast, the more I felt the whisper. It wasn't wind, it wasn't waves, it was something murmuring my name from below. When I told this to Julia, her eyes widened. She asked if I had ever heard voices before. I said no, not before that night. The sea was restless, though the sky was clear. The waves hit the hull too hard for a windless day. I should have turned back, and I thought about it, God knows I did. But something inside me said just a little further, until I saw it. Far ahead, floating over the water, there was what looked like a glow. But solid light doesn't exist at sea. Light doesn't just stay there like that. And that glow grew, pulsed, breathed. I felt a tightness in my chest, as if the tide had suddenly leapt up and gripped my heart. The boat began to tremble, even without big waves. And then suddenly, the air grew heavy. The sky closed, the water darkened like spilled ink. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest thing was that there was no storm. It was as if only around my boat that turmoil existed, as if I were surrounded, separated from the rest of the ocean, trapped in a dome of wind and darkness. Naturally, Julia interrupted again. She said it sounded like a movie. I replied that I'd think the same. If I hadn't lived every second of it, I'll never forget the sound. The waters became so still, so profoundly silent, that each of my breaths sounded like thunder in the emptiness. And then, from below, came the noise, a dry crack, like wood splitting. Then another, and another. The sea began bubbling. The glow grew brighter, as if about to break the surface. The entire boat groaned, and something rose. At first I saw a shadow, then a long shape. It was as if a giant serpent were sliding up from the depths of the ocean. But it wasn't a serpent, nor fish, nor whale. It was something I should never have seen. Julia squeezed my hand at this part. She asked if it was a monster. I told her yes, at least at the time I thought it was. The creature emerged slowly, very slowly, like someone waking after centuries of sleep. Its bluish skin was covered in cracks that glowed like rivers of light. Its eyes didn't blink and were far too large, far too deep, and it spoke. Not with its mouth, with the water. I felt its voice inside my head like a cold current crawling down my spine. It didn't speak words, it spoke intentions. And the intention was clear. It wanted me to follow. I tried to start the engine to flee, but it died instantly. No noise, no failure. It simply went silent, as if silenced by invisible hands. The creature turned its long, luminous body and began to swim, leaving a trail of light in the water. And I followed. Why did I follow? Julia asked me that 3 times. I told her what I felt that night. It was as if I were bound to that creature by something deep, something beyond my will. I had to follow, as if my destiny were tied to its glowing tail. We sailed through a vast blackness where the sea looked like dark glass. The sky had no stars, no moon, no life. The silence was so enormous, it felt as if the world had been switched off. Until she stopped over a region where the water had a strange color, almost violet. And then she dove, fast as lightning. I should have stayed on the boat, but I didn't. I dove after her. Julia was outraged, saying I was crazy. I said yes, that I was. The sea there was so cold it burned. I dove barely able to see, but I followed the creature's light, that blue glow that seemed to pulse like a giant heart. Then the bottom appeared before me. It wasn't sand. It was a fissure, an enormous crack, opening like a mouth in the darkness. Light poured out of it. An ancient light, a light that seemed to breathe. And inside that light, there was something I don't have human words to fully describe. It was as if the sea had kept a memory there, a living memory pulsing, waiting. The creature stopped before the fissure. Then it looked at me, and in that gaze I understood. It needed me, not to kill me, not to take me, but for me to be a witness. And I was. When I touched the light, or when it touched me, hard to know, I saw images, vast, impossible images, as immense as the ocean itself. I saw submerged cities from eras we never studied. I saw spirits dancing among currents. I saw creatures shaping the tide like clay. And I heard the creature's voice. This time, clear. It didn't speak words, but it spoke truths. Truths about the sea, about time, about the life hidden beneath us. Truths no human should know. When I returned to the surface, I fainted. I woke in the Orvalhado, the boat gently rocking. The sky was clear, blue, beautiful, as if nothing had happened. The engine worked. The glow was gone. So was the creature. I thought it had all been a dream, a hallucination from exhaustion. And then I saw the mark. On my arm, near the elbow, there was a symbol, like a thin cut, but glowing like sunlit water. The symbol was not human, and it was warm, and in that moment I knew it was all real. Julia, of course, exploded with curiosity. She asked how I could prove it, said her mother would never believe it. I laughed, because that's the best part of the story. I stood up with difficulty, went to the old wooden chest in the corner, the same one I've kept since I was young, and took out a small flask. Inside it was water, but not ordinary water. Water that glowed on its own, as if holding a tiny piece of that blue light. I told Julia I had collected some of the light stuck to the boat's hull when I woke. I kept it because I knew no one would believe me, and she saw it with her own eyes. The glow, the living light, the same color, the same pulse, the same truth. The sea had spoken to me, and I had listened. When I finished, Julia was so quiet she seemed to forget to breathe. She held the flask in her small hands, and the light danced in her eyes. She asked if I wasn't afraid. I told her the truth. The sea isn't scary. The sea demands respect. And that night, Julia, that night I learned to respect something much greater than myself. She looked at me with that curiosity only children have. Then she rested her head on my shoulder and whispered that she believed me, that she always believed my stories. And then softly, almost as if confessing a secret, she said that sometimes when she listens to the sea at night, she also thinks it speaks. I smiled, because I know it does. I ended by telling Julia something I've never told anyone. Not her mother, not my old fishing companions. In recent years, whenever the sea wants to warn me about something, the symbol on my arm glows. Not always, but enough for me to know the creature hasn't forgotten me. And that night, as the tide rose slowly, bringing the darkness with it, the symbol glowed again. Faintly, but it glowed. Julia noticed and grabbed my arm tightly. She asked if the creature was coming back. I answered, "The creature never left. The sea keeps its secrets, my granddaughter, and some choose who can hear them." And the wind blew from the ocean, carrying a murmur so soft it truly sounded like an ancient voice whispering my name. And Julia heard it too. I saw it in her eyes.